It seems like every time I open YouTube, I see a big old video talking about fixing the MCU. And I think that's because we're at a point where almost all fans realize that Marvel's not doing so hot and that things need to be fixed. But there are some wild takes on what is actually wrong with Marvel and how they fix it. And so I thought this would make for a fun video where we're gonna go over what other people are saying is wrong with the MCU. Then I'll explain why they're absolutely incorrect. And then finally, I'll talk about what's actually wrong with the Marvel Cinematic Universe and how I would fix it. Buckle up and let's begin. So I want to talk about the most prevalent criticism that I see about Marvel currently, and it's the one that's driving me absolutely crazy. And I want to say firmly, strongly, unequivocally, no. The multiverse is not what's wrong with the MCU. I've seen countless people talking about this, talking about how the multiverse is just simply too weird. I've seen the take that the multiverse isn't interesting enough, that it doesn't allow for actual character development, that it's just a big old freaking weird, goofy comic book idea that normies are not going to get on board with. And I mean, whoa, that is really triggering because the facts just speak to the opposite. The two most successful projects for the past couple of years of Marvel have been Spider-Man No Way Home and Multiverse of Madness. Spider-Man No Way Home made over $2 billion. It really made like Avengers Infinity War-esque money, crazy amounts of money. And Multiverse of Madness is the biggest performing Marvel movie outside of No Way Home, getting very close to $1 billion without the Chinese market. The most successful Disney Plus show to date is Loki, doing massive numbers, bigger than any other original series on Disney Plus and way ahead of all of the Marvel Disney Plus shows. And all three of those projects deal with the multiverse. Hell, Everything Everywhere All at Once literally just won Best Picture last year, and it is a multiversal movie. The multiverse is so clearly not the issue with Marvel currently. In fact, you could almost make the opposite argument. You could make the argument that after Avengers Infinity War and Endgame, a concept as interesting as the multiverse is literally the only thing that is still interesting most of the fans. It's like on the one hand, you have Marvel doing really interesting things with the multiverse with fan favorite characters, and then on the other hand, you have less popular characters having nothing to do with the multiverse or the wider MCU story being explored intimately. If anything, they should be doing more multiverse, more variants, more craziness, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's stay on target. The next thing that I see a lot of people talking about in their how to fix the MCU videos is the visual effects. They're talking about the CGI, the design of the backgrounds, and even the models of the characters. And I'm sorry, but no, the lackluster CGI is not what's hurting the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And this one at least carries a little bit more weight than the first one because there are clearly a lot of projects in the MCU's Phase 4, and I would argue even Quantumania, that have really lackluster CGI. Like there are parts of Moon Knight where cars in the background look like they're coming off of a Nintendo 64. She-Hulk has wildly varying quality of models between herself and Bruce Banner, and they're so bad with the CGI that they didn't even show Jennifer transforming for most of the show. Quantumania was apparently so crunched that they cut out a ton of the action sequences in the movie because they simply weren't going to be done visual effects wise by the time the film came out. And part of this problem is that they just are doing way too many projects, which I think most people realize, but it's also the fact that Marvel has a particularly chaotic system for actually making their final products. They do a lot of testing and they look at their products a lot to see if they want to make changes. The problem is they do this right up until they literally cannot. And what this will often turn into is a bunch of VFX artists being told with a very short time window that they have to alter or change what shots are getting the finalized VFX. And so, yeah, that's definitely a problem. I don't love that they do that, and I hope they find a way to get more better visual effects actually finished, and I think slowing down is going to get them there. But I'd argue that Marvel was never really sold off of the backs of absolutely incredible CGI. Like, Like the Avatar movies, sure, those are literally sold as visual spectacle events. And you could make the argument that maybe Doctor Strange 1 in the Marvel Cinematic Universe was also sold as a crazy visual experience. But if you take an honest look back at the entire catalog of Marvel, even when they were in their heyday, you will see a lot of little blemishes and whack visual effects. All of the heroes and seemingly all of the villains all come from the same costume designer. They all have a very similar look, like it's always been that way. Oftentimes, the palettes for some of the best Marvel movies are muted, not really crazy with a lot of variety. Ragnarok and Guardians of the Galaxy, sure, they had some crazy visual effects going on. I think both of those directors are very visual in the way that they want to tell their stories. But we had a long run of Russo brothers movies in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, which really never had a crazy amount of visual effects. They never really blew us away, and the color palettes for a lot of these movies were muted. I just reject the idea that lackluster visual effects is really the thing that's hurting Marvel right now, because again, one of their most successful projects, Spider-Man No Way Home, had literally unfinished effects in its theatrical release. They actually tightened up the effects on that and changed them for the Blu-ray and digital release. It just doesn't feel accurate to say that the magic we used to feel in Marvel projects was really associated with the visual effects, and that now that the visual effects are not as good, that's the reason that the magic isn't there. And the last one I want to talk about is this idea that Marvel went too far into identity politics and that they're too woke. And holy shit, does this one trigger me, so I'm going to try to stay on target and talk about this as concisely as I can. But no, Marvel doing woke, quote, things is not what's hurting the Marvel Cinematic Universe. I know this one's really weird and triggering for people, like some of you guys out there are like, no, it absolutely is that. They went woke and now they're going broke. And other people among you are like, what does woke even mean? It's this unidentifiable, just made up ethereal thing that just has to do with doing normal ass Hollywood things they've been doing forever. And I kind of think that you could call certain things being done in shows woke, or maybe just being done for the sake of like representation, you know, other like more leftist ideas. Like She-Hulk's a great example, and I think it's the one that really drives this home. There's absolutely, in my opinion, a pretty crazy, unhinged feminist rant in the first episode of the show. But that's not why the show's bad. The show's just bad, dude. It's weird. It's all over the place. The character motivations don't make any sense. And is that moment in episode 1 with the feminist rant really cringy? Absolutely. Is it low-hanging fruit for people that want to make anti-woke arguments? Absolutely. But it doesn't have to be the thing that actually made the show bad. Like, the show could have actually been good. Similarly, in Thor Love and Thunder, you are adapting a story from the comic books that made Jane Foster Thor, and the whole idea behind that was female empowerment. So again, through some kind of a lens, maybe you consider that to be woke or bad. But the reality is, it didn't have to suck. It could have actually been interesting, and Jane Foster's character in that movie is so one-note and one-dimensional, unbelievably daft yet plucky. It was horrible for reasons completely unassociated with the premise of making a female Thor. Like, there are literally modern-day comic book adaptations that are quote-unquote woke that are still freaking awesome, like Jessica Jones season 1. Always an example I bring up. It touches on all of these different things that you might, call woke, and yet it is compelling. The characters feel authentic. The story is way interesting, very, very enticing and engaging. And another great example is The Boys. Now, The Boys does several things that I think are like pushing the line, but one of them is the political way they tackle, quote unquote, people on the right. They really do depict like MAGA Republicans and that sort of idea in a really, really negative light, which you might consider to be culture war-esque or woke. And yet the show is so damn good that millions and millions of people are watching it. It's breaking into Nielsen top 10 charts. It's crushing it as a franchise. So again, that one's very triggering either way for people. I just think it's bullcrap. Is it something that's happening? Sure. Is it the actual root cause of the magic going away from Marvel? Absolutely not. And just like all the other things that I brought up in this first half of the video, what I think's going on is people have their own personal gripes with Marvel, some gripes that they've had for maybe the entire time Marvel has been making movies. And now that we're all starting to see the cracks and that the narrative out there about Marvel is less positive, everybody wants to claim that their own personal gripes with Marvel is the reason Marvel's not succeeding. And that's just not true. And so I want to tell you in very simple terms, the biggest problem that Marvel is facing and how they should get out of it. The biggest problem is that the magic of the experience is no longer there. It's no longer there in the same way that it was. To be more specific and to be crystal clear about what I am talking about, I'm saying that the magic of going to see all of the Marvel movies in the lead up to Infinity War and Endgame had a magical feeling associated with them. It felt like something you wanted to be a part of and you wanted to get other people to be a part of as well. Just like any popular show or piece of media, it came out, grabbed the zeitgeist, and there's something really special about being a part of that big global group that's all experiencing this thing together. This is why this happens. People love experiencing it and they love talking about it, being in community with each other, talking about it. It's a part of the formula. And essentially what created this initially was this absolute love for the comic book characters and the comic book story and the desire to see them done justice on the actual movie screen. And so the first couple of years of Marvel were really more like, oh my gosh, they're actually making this. It's working. It's so fun and it's so cool that I can get my non-comic book friends to come check it out and then we can all nerd out about Iron Man, his comic book history, etc. But then there was a slight dip at the end of phase 1 and at the beginning of phase 2 for Marvel, where even Iron Man 2, which the first movie like launched this whole thing and brought so many people in, even Iron Man 2 wasn't considered as good. It didn't hit as well with audiences or with critics. And this was when Kevin Feige realized that he couldn't just do sequels and do formulaic stuff, that he instead had to up the ante. And then we get into movies like The Winter Soldier, where they're having really big ideas take place in these really intimate character-driven stories. Like the idea that S.H.I.E.L.D. itself in the Marvel Cinematic Universe was actually infiltrated by Hydra a long time ago and was actually serving evil purposes for a long time is a really massive and big idea. And yet it's also uniquely interesting to Captain America and his journey in the modern world, trying to decipher what his place is and how he should view morality. Tony Stark creating Ultron because of his experiences in the first Avenger movie is really compelling. It's an interesting, really big idea that then gets explored further with Civil War, the Sokovia Accords, and I think looking back at it, we don't acknowledge as much of how these really big ideas kept being introduced into the overall fabric of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. So essentially, Marvel's biggest problem was succeeding on this massive global scale of telling this really crazy story that was almost like episodes of television with movies for 5 to 6 years leading up into Infinity War and Endgame, having this massive, awesome, impactful conclusion. Because again, guys, the snap and the blip actually being canon in Marvel, like these are really big ideas. I just remember being shocked at Endgame, right? Like it's shocking that they would do that big of an idea. And then we go from that into a Black Widow movie that happens in the past, a Shang-Chi origin story, really just talking about his past with his father, the Eternals, which is this whole cast of characters that have been around forever but haven't been actively engaged in any of the conflicts we just experienced in the whole 10-year lead up to Infinity War and Endgame, and on and on and on. I mean, the Hawkeye show, the Moon Knight show, all of these shows not really having massive and big ideas, and instead feeling like they're more at place at phase 1 or phase 2 was a mistake. It was a bad idea to meander, to not have singular focus, and to not be introducing really freaking big ideas. I think part of this problem was exacerbated, of course, because of all the delays due to the pandemic, due to the fact that Sony was playing hardball with the Spider-Man character, due to the untimely passing of Chadwick Boseman. But I frankly think Feige was too married to the idea of being able to turn it down a little bit, like turn the heat down for Marvel and coast for a couple of years before he turned it back up with some really crazy multiversal ideas. And I think that's the biggest problem Marvel is facing, and the way they fix it is with more really big ideas. And I think the multiverse is a great way to have those big ideas, but even in your projects that aren't going to be involved in the multiverse, you need gigantic, fun, crazy ideas. Like, to me, it's absolutely absurd that Marvel has the X-Men back, they have the Fantastic Four back, which includes characters like Galactus, Silver Surfer, and Doctor Doom, and yet they want us to watch Vision Quest, Agatha Coven of Chaos, Ironheart, and all kinds of other littler, like less significant shows before we just get into what we really want. Now, the good news is I think they're actually aware of this. Like, I think Feige is literally going in and trying to juice up as many projects as he possibly can. Bringing in Harrison Ford as the president, Thunderbolt Ross, and making him Red Hulk, mind-blowing. Very compelling idea. Utilizing Tiamat Island to show you adamantium, perhaps even bring in the Weapon Plus, Weapon X program connected to mutants. Brilliant idea. Doing the Sentry and having him be this crazy factor in the Thunderbolts movie. Brilliant idea. Deadpool 3, bringing in the TVA, going multiversal, visiting the Fantastic Four, perhaps even having different variants of Wolverine played by Hugh Jackman. Big idea. Really cool. Really, really fun. And so I think they're fixing the problem, and there are really dope things coming down the path here, but I'm a little frustrated that they still want to do the Agatha show, that they still want to do Vision Quest and Wonder Man and all of these smaller projects that to me just don't seem hyped enough or big enough. And I think if you dilute your product and just put a bunch of stuff out like that and you don't rebuild into that crazy magic, that's still just a recipe for at least half of your stuff not being embraced and certainly not having that crazy magical feel, which I think ultimately could lead to even more fatigue. So there you have it, guys. My take on how to fix Marvel, why they're already doing that, but why I'm also concerned about some of the other things they're doing. We will certainly see how it all shakes out. I'm a little bit worried about the projects in 2023, but I think a lot of the stuff going on in 2024, like Daredevil Born Again, Thunderbolts, Captain America New World Order, they sound dope, and I think Feige is going big. Smash like on this video if you enjoyed it. If you want to watch more, why not check out this video I recently made about Kevin Feige taking on actual leakers and snapping them out of existence.